kind of part down on the ends. I'm going to round it over, and I'll end up with two little spigots, of course, where the centers are holding it. And then we'll go to pinch points between a chuck like this and something in the tailstock like this. And then we'll be able to free turn that and keep turning it along 3 axes to where it's round. And using the ghost image where it's out around, we'll turn that away, and hopefully at some point we're round. So I'm going to start out with, let me get my goggles. Can everybody hear me? Okay. So I have a spindle roughing gouge, which is a deep, if you haven't seen these, they're deep U-shaped, kind of a thick, same thickness around it, and you can, very good for spindle turning. You can rough out with a point, you can flip it over on the side, and shear cut like that too. So let's get started. Let's see, so can you see the ghost image there? Is it too fast? I'll go slow first. So you can kind of see that wobble there. I can see about a 1/4 inch. Okay, so first I'm going to make a cylinder. Okay, totally round. It's not quite flat, but it doesn't really need to be. I just need to know where the center is now. So I just usually do this by eye. So this is going to be my diameter. You can check and see if you have enough length for that. If not, you'll need to come down a little bit in diameter. Okay, so if I throw that up, just kind of eyeball it, I have about a 1/4 inch on either side. Can you see that? Let's see here. Yeah, so I have a little bit extra, which is what I want for my spigot, so about there and there. You can measure it if you want. It's totally up to you. You can use a template too if you need to get that shape. I just kind of eyeball it and go from there. So if I just mark that, so I have a center line and I have my 2 endpoints. Okay, now I'm going to part down, rotary peel down the ends just to give me the exact diameter of the end of the sphere. So using the lead point of the skew, I'm just going to rotary peel down like this, pulling up the tool handle. This is a round skew. It's a little challenging to use into space like that, but you work at it and it's not too bad. So I'm just going to peel on down. So about the diameter of the tailstock. And do the same on the other side. Like that. If you want to practice your skew work, you can kind of do the shear cut and clean up the end. You don't have to, but just for practice. So using that long point, bring her on down. And you can see how clean a cut that. Well, can't see it there, but you can get a pretty smooth cut versus the other side. Okay, Now we're ready to round over into a sphere shape, so I'm just going to knock the ends of the cylinder over and go down to the spigots. So this is it's a 1/2 inch bowl gouge. Kind of the wings are just swept back a little bit, not too far. Right there. Just a little bit of a wing. And rub the bevel and roll it over. Okay, so they're pretty good. Again, if you wanted to, you could have a little template to help you get there. So move on to the other side. This is a little shorter than my lathe. Almost got a... Now I could do it, left-handed too. See how I do here. So if you kind of can tuck that in there and then use your hips, gives you a little easier control. Try to do that. All right, that's pretty close. Doesn't have to be perfect. We'll get the roundness when we go to the axes. You kind of want to leave it a little bit football shaped so that you don't lose a little bit of diameter when you go to rotate it, which you'll see here in a second. So I'll pop this, one more thing. I need to get rid of the spigots now. I could turn them off depending on how hard they are. I could just pinch and then turn them off, but you can also part down and then cut them off. So just just a homemade parting tool out of a metal cutting bandsaw blade. Okay, so there's kind of the rough ball shape. A little Japanese saw here.
Hey John, first hold that up so Steve can get it on camera. There we go.
I was going for that camera. All right, how's that? Kind of see a little bit left there. So I'm just going to cut off the spigots. Okay, there you go. When I started off, I chose the pith on this. The pith is through this. This is hard maple. I think it's hard maple. It's maple anyway. And I just like that alignment, I guess. If you're going to have the pith in it, I put it in the center of the ball.
How's green in there?
This is very dry. It's been sitting around for 3 years. It's a branch. It wasn't much. You saw the diameter when I started out. If you're going to do any of this, it's got to be dry, because once you're done and turn the ball, it's you're going to end up with unless you want a football when you're done, but it'll warp and it'll crack too. I did some with some hornbeam and turned it green, and thought, well, I don't mind if it cracks a little bit. It just, you know, split in half almost. Okay. I need the knockout tool. Thanks. I was using a steb center. If you haven't seen those, they're got a bunch of teeth on. I'm not used to. Here we go. Got a bunch of teeth on it and a point that has a spring in it, so it'll push out against the wood. I like them for that kind of small work. Grabs on really nice, quickly. And as far as the tail stack, you really don't want to have a cone center because it'll dig in and, you know, push into your ball. So I've been using a little cup center with a little point in it. Okay. So I'm going to switch to the pinch points now. So I have a 4-jaw chuck, and I've turned a little cup center. I have a smaller one here I can pass around. So the idea here is that this cup needs to be just a little bit smaller diameter than your ball. If it's a larger diameter, the ball will roll around inside there. So it wants to be seated on. You got to be seated on the ring here. Otherwise, you'll never get it centered. It'll wobble around. And on the tailstock side, you need some type of pinch point there with the same idea, but okay, whoop. There we go. So I've made a little wooden plug that screws onto my tailstock. If you have one like this, take the cone off. There'll be a little threaded rod on there. And I just glued a nut. I don't know if I can, well, you have to look at it, but I just glued a nut right into there, and if you turn it around and put a screw in there, you can turn this to whatever shape you want, and then when you get around to here, you may have to true it up a little bit to make sure it's totally round or centered. Does everybody get that? Okay. So this has to be just dead on. There can't be any wobble to it. Yeah?
You ever put any like rubber padding or anything, or is it just wood-to-wood friction?
I do. In fact, I can pass these around. Here's my first tailstock end, and it's got a little leather pad on it. Here's one I made for this ball, so it's kind of has the shape for that. And here's just another one, but same idea. So these had leather pads glued onto them, which can help on the, you kind of lose a little bit of accuracy, I guess, because you'll have a little bit of play in that leather or pad, but you gain in that you don't get, those rings will tend to make a compression ring in the wood. Especially if you have a soft wood like pine, you'll get a little ring. And you can kind of just keep working until the end and then maybe slip in a piece of leather, or I even slip in like little pieces of the closed cell foam, something like that. So I'll stick it in there just to finish at the end. All right, so I'm going to check this. Going to clean that up a little bit. You kind of hear a little bit of a, wobble. So you want to get rid of that. And I'm just going to clean up the outside so I won't have any imbalance. And on the tailstock end, I've just kind of done this by hand. That seems to help out a little bit. If if there's any wobble in there, just hold your tool up there and spin it. Need you up here to spin this for me, Ron, so I can. All right, so even if you've turned it on that side, flipped it around, I usually find that it's off a little bit if your lathe, isn't quite lined up. So you want to be as perfect as you can. You don't want to have any wobble. Okay. So I have my original line there, right? So that's one axis, and I'm going to rotate that. And I'm going to stick it in the cup center. I'm going to pull up the tailstock. And each time you do this, you want to do it the same way. And for me, it's worked where I press as hard as I can against that, and I bring up the tailstock like that. And if you look, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little bit of a gap there, right there. Maybe if I do it that way. So you can see I'm not round yet, of course. And the idea is to get there. And then what you want to do is make sure that axis line, you can kind of see it, but you want to have them centered as best you can in the middle of the pinch points. So I would pull this out, rotate a little bit, look at it. If I like it, then I do this and then pinch it up. At home, I just tend to kind of hit it once, the same pressure each time. I'm going to lock this down here so Phyllis doesn't catch the ball. I didn't bring my catcher's mitt for you, but. Okay, so we'll dial this down first. All right, can you see the ghost image now? There's about 1/8 of an inch. Maybe not? Yeah? Okay. So we're going to turn away the ghost image and then rotate it again to the third axis and then just keep growing until, hopefully it's a sphere. So starting in the middle. This is So I'm really looking either right there or at the bottom at that ghost image. This is really hard to do in a small lathe. All right, so I was off a little bit on my lineup, so which is typical. So I have one side, one pole, if you will, that's smooth, and one that's not. So I pretty much got the ghost image out of the way, but as you can see, it's a little flat here. Excuse me. So at some point, I need to get down there anyway, so I might as well do it now. Is how I look at it. So I'm just going to take it down a little bit past what the ball is saying is round, I guess, to get to that unfinished area. I could end up with a sphere that was round, but I'd still have, the spigot would be recessed or something. Okay, so both poles are done. There's just a little bit there, which is great. And I'm going to go ahead and rotate it. So I take my pencil and I'm going to make a center line off, and I'm going to make two so I can remember which axis that was. It's very challenging to remember which axis you're on, and I found that to help out quite a bit. So you can see the first one and the second one. So I would rotate it this way. There's only one choice now to get your third axis. Okay. And then I look at my center lines and see if they're perfectly in line with the pinch points, and they're off a little bit. So I go a little bit of rotation. That's pretty close. So now I'm going to seat it again. So I back off, push back on the cup, and then one and a half turns, lock it in. You still see there's a little bit of a gap there, so not quite round yet. So this is axis 3. You see I'm a lot closer now to round. So I just kind of do once I get to where the wobble's out of the way, just kind of do a nice sweeping cut with a point. Lead a little bit with the left edge in this case. All right, so we're getting close. On the really, the problem areas are trying to keep from digging in as you go around the far edges. One thing I've found out, if I kind of cut on that upper left edge, holding the gouge up to noon, it's actually an easier cut. It doesn't.
Look how far off the ball he's cutting when he's cutting it.
So here I can see I'm straight up and down. I'm cutting back cut, if you will, with that left. And I can see I can really control how thin I want to get. And I can just kind of nibble away with that back cut. So in this case, I think it really helps out. It's a better cut to use as opposed to leading with the point, if you will, like this. Which also works, it's just you have a bigger tendency to gouge in. I've tried it and it's just hard to do. But I will scrape here in a second, so. So I'm just kind of doing some sweeping. Now, you can also, go ahead.
When you look at the ball and you're examining that line, are you basically, I'm trying to understand what it is you're looking for. Are you trying to make that pencil line disappear?
No, not at all. I'm trying to get rid of any wobble or the ghost image. The ghost image now is negligible because I've gotten to 3 axes. I can hear now more, and I have to turn it off to see really where I'm at. So it's more of a feel and sound at this point. And now I'm just gonna scrape a little bit, and that'll help me get there, get rid of some of those finer grooves, if you will, and just have a fingernail gouge with the wings really swept back. So I'm just gonna scrape like that.
And why did you not use the fingernail gouge, since this is basically like spin and turn, as opposed to the bowl gouge for your rough work?
To me, I just get a little more control with the bowl gouge. I think you could use maybe a wider, not a fingernail point, but I'm sure, yeah, a shallow gouge would be fine. Whoa. Okay, so just a little bit of scraping here. So you can really hear that, I'm not quite there yet, which I would expect. All right, so now this is the 3rd axis. So I'm going to put 3 lines on there. Help me remember. And hopefully I can still see my original one. So here's my first one. So I'm going to go back to that. Okay, you can kind of see how it's off to that side. So I want to get back to as close as I can to the original axes.
At the point that you're at right now, does it really matter that you have to go back to that axis? I mean, 'cause you pretty much have a sphere right now.
I do, but you'll see that when I get back to this, it's not round anymore because the other 2 have worked on it. So you can see the wobble already. So you just kind of you're slowly creeping up on it. And if you go to other axes, you'll never get there, I don't think. That's my understanding. So.
Does it matter which end goes to the headstock?
Which end? Oh, if I flipped it over?
Yeah, and
I probably have. I don't know if I realized it or not, but I don't think it matters. Like this, if I go, yeah. I don't know. I never thought of that. Let's see what happens. Is this better? About the same? Probably not. But. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing. I'm pushing back. Oop. So I have a pretty good ghost image again. But I know I'm rounder because I don't have as much big of a gap in that cup center.
you went back to the bowl gouge.
So I'm back to the bowl gouge. You can kind of see it sounds a little better because I'm closer to round. So there's not as much wobble. Oop. So there's a groove. So I got to go back down to that elevation. So yeah, that's the problem I find if I'm leading with a point, it tends to grab in there easy, and then you got a groove. So. All right. So she's a lot of chatter there. Not too bad right here. Okay, I still have a little bit of my original line, so I don't have to mark it again. Try and find 2. There's 2.
In the perfect sphere, will you lose your line?
Not necessarily. I mean, I'm never going to be perfect with this type of method, but you can get pretty darn close. And you probably scrape off that line if I'm scraping.
Perfect enough for wood turning?
That's right. Good enough for a geologist, but not an engineer, maybe. Eh? I'm a geologist by training. So. Okay, so I don't see any real wobble here. I can hear it a little bit. Just a little bit of back cut. That's getting very close. So that was axis 1. I'm going to go one more round here, go through 3. So here's 2. Okay, so that's pretty close. Seat it in there, pinch it up. So using the back cut, just kind of come around the edges. Just a little nibble. At this point, you're better off taking less than more and just keep going around on the axes. And if I can find 3 now, there's 2. Thought I was on 2. I guess I wasn't. Okay, that one is pretty darn close. Right, I'm getting very close.
Yeah.
So you can almost only just hear it now. I'll do one more and then call her good.
At what point do you start sanding here?
Well, I would do, when I think I'm not seeing anything else as I go around. And then I just do the same thing on axes. Sand this axis, rotate it. That way you're taking off hopefully the same amount on each direction, if you will. Let's see, here we go.
What grip would you start with on?
Oh, 220. Depends on how, if it's a softwood, 320, something like that. So, 220 would be fine here. Okay, one more time. So that one's very nice. And here that sounds, there's hardly any interrupted cut there. Well, that's not bad. A little bit over here, but. All right, I think that's it. So now I would sand, get this out of the way and, do each axis, same as turning, and then hopefully you've come down to, not get it out around on softer wood or, What was that?
When you're sand, aren't you going to lose your line?
Right, it doesn't matter at that point. I'm round.
So you can
But you can just do 2 or 3 or a whole bunch, at that point, I think.
Keep in